The cowboy's hands shook. Rope bit into the woman's wrists, but the knife didn't care. It caught the fibers, slicing slowly, methodically, until one side gave way. He didn't look at her face. He couldn't. The baby screamed, high and sharp, and he lifted him first, instinct overriding thought. Warm weight, soft skin, tiny fists. He pressed him to his chest, feeling the rhythm of a life barely begun. The woman groaned. Her head lolled against the fence post, eyes half closed, mouth dry. He crouched low, holding the baby away from her, and whispered, "Hey. Hey, don't sleep." Her lips moved, a dry sound. "Mine," she said when he asked whose child it was. Her voice thin, cautious, almost afraid it would vanish if spoken. "You're tied up," he said. "I know," she answered. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for anything. Just measured him with her eyes. Heavy, quiet, dangerous. He kept holding the baby even after he'd cut the last rope free. She didn't flinch when her wrists were free. Just watched him. Waiting. The cowboy moved. The fence scratched his palms. He shifted the baby against his chest. "You need water?" he asked. She shook her head. The wind carried the sound of something distant, a gate creaking, an animal in a field, but it didn't reach her focus. Only him. Only the baby. Only the fence post that held her for hours, the rough wood still smelling faintly of her sweat and old blood. He tried to check her arms. Bruises. Rope burns. Small cuts. Nothing that would kill her, not yet. His hands lingered. She didn't flinch, didn't reach out. Just stared. "Who did this?" he asked. Silence. Only the baby's cries replied. "Talk to me," he said. No answer. He let it go. She wouldn't explain. Wouldn't speak the names. Wouldn't beg. The sun lowered. Shadows stretched. The fence post threw a jagged line across her chest. The baby kicked, arms flailing. He adjusted him, rocking gently. "Don't sleep," he said again, though she could hear him. He tried to lift her, but she stiffened. "I can't," he started. She stopped him with a look. Sharp. Clear. "Enough." He set her back. Waited. Silent. Only the baby's cries filled the space. He searched pockets. Nothing. A pack of matches, a knife, some coins. No weapon. Nothing to hurt him if she woke angry. He pressed the baby tighter. Her eyes followed the movements, like she was weighing him. Trust, maybe. Or suspicion. Hard to tell. He didn't move closer. Didn't retreat. Just kept the baby between them, breathing him in, feeling his small chest rise and fall. A sudden sound. Gravel crushed under tires. Distant engines rolling, slowing. Someone coming. The cowboy didn't flinch. He kept the baby close. The woman didn't move. Only her eyes flicked toward the road, registering the sound, calculating. He felt the baby shift, kicking. Whispered, "Easy." She made no sound, no gesture. Only waited. He waited with her. The rope fibers still hung from the fence, catching the light as the engines approached. He glanced at them, then back at her. The baby's cries softened, but the tension didn't. Engines slowed. Gravel shifted. Time held. Breath held. Nothing moved but him, her, the tiny life in his arms, and the fence post that had claimed her body. Silence, heavy and precise, stretched between them. He adjusted his grip on the newborn. She watched, unblinking, measuring, seeing. The world contracted to this one fence, one baby, one pair of eyes. The engine slowed to a crawl, but he didn't look up. She didn't move. Only waited. Only measured. Only endured. The headlights cut the dark like knives. Dust rose in thin clouds along the dirt road. Gravel crunched under tires. The cowboy stayed low, the baby pressed to his chest, body rigid. The woman's hands rested on the post, loose but tense. Her eyes narrowed at the approaching light. He whispered, "Stay behind me." She didn't move. Didn't speak. Only the baby cried, small and sharp, echoing across the empty land. The truck stopped. Engine idled. Sheriff stepped out, tall, slow, hands empty. Deputy lingered behind him, easy, too relaxed. "That your kid?" the sheriff asked, voice calm, clipped. The cowboy didn't answer right away. He kept holding the baby. "She said it is," he said finally. The sheriff's eyes didn't flicker. "She say a lot?" he asked. "No," the cowboy replied. The sheriff tilted his head. No movement in the deputy, just quiet observation. The night pressed down, heavy and still. The cowboy shifted. The baby's fists banged against his chest. "Don't hurt him," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The woman's eyes followed every move, steady, calculating. Sheriff stepped closer. "I'm not here to hurt," he said, slow, deliberate. "Just make sure everyone's safe." He didn't reach for the baby. Didn't move the woman. Only words, careful, quiet. The cowboy didn't lower his guard. Grip tightened on the small, wriggling body. "Get in the truck," the sheriff said. The woman didn't move. She waited. He tried again, gentler. She shook her head slightly. The baby cried louder. The cowboy rubbed the back of its neck. "It's okay," he whispered. "Don't cry." Sheriff looked at him, eyebrows raised, silent warning in the tilt of his head. The deputy shifted, boots scraping gravel. The night smelled of dust and metal. The woman finally moved. Slow, deliberate, hands still shaking. She stepped toward the truck. The cowboy stayed behind her, baby held high. Sheriff asked, "Name?" She said nothing. The cowboy answered for her. "None yet." He didn't look at the sheriff. Sheriff sighed, shaking his head. "All right," he said. No further movement. The truck doors closed. Engine hummed. The woman inside, baby resting against her chest, eyes still measuring. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. Just waited. Sheriff stepped closer to the cowboy. "You alone out here?" he asked. Cowboy didn't flinch. "Yeah." "You know what happens if someone sees you with her like that?" "I'm not leaving her," he said. Silence fell. The deputy shifted, restless. Gravel underfoot. Night thick, waiting. The sheriff's lips tightened. "You understand me?" "I understand." Words simple, heavy with meaning. Baby stirred. Cowboy adjusted him. The woman watched. Eyes like fire behind shadow. The sheriff moved back to the truck. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said over his shoulder. Engine turned, wheels crunched gravel. The truck rolled slowly into the night. Headlights faded. Sound of tires on dirt dwindled to nothing. The cowboy stood still, chest tight, baby in arms. The woman stepped down from the truck bed, hesitant, hands still trembling. He handed the baby back, carefully, slowly. She held him against her chest. The night settled around them, thick with unspoken words, heavy with what they hadn't said. He waited. She didn't speak. Only the baby's soft whimpers. Dust swirled around their boots. The fence post leaned under the weight of memory, shadow stretching long, catching the last gleam of headlights gone. "Don't let anyone take him," she finally said, barely above a whisper. He nodded. Tightened his grip on the dirt beneath his boots. The engines were gone. Gravel lay undisturbed. The night waited. The baby stirred, tiny fists clenching, small cries breaking the heavy silence. He didn't move. She didn't move. Only the weight of the night, the faint smell of dust, the small life between them. Words had been spoken, warnings exchanged. No one had touched the baby. No one had forced the woman to say more than she chose. The cowboy held the space, steady. She measured him once more. He held the baby high, pressing him close. Waiting. The distant roads whispered with tires and gravel, the town far behind, leaving them alone in a dark that felt alive, listening. The night thickened, the fence post looming, the baby sleeping fitfully, the woman standing steady despite everything. Engines gone. Gravel silent. Dust settled. They remained, bound by nothing but presence and quiet understanding. No one moved. Only breath, faint and quick, and the weight of what had just happened. Time held. The sheriff's office smelled of old wood and stale coffee. The cowboy followed her inside, baby pressed to her chest, small fists curling against the blanket. She moved like she was part of the shadows, careful, slow, eyes sharp. He set the baby down on the cot. He didn't speak. She didn't move. Only watched him from behind the folds of the blanket. "Who did this?" the sheriff asked, voice low, steady. She didn't answer. Only shifted, tightening her hold on the baby. The cowboy leaned against the wall, silent. "You know," she said finally. The sheriff's lips pressed into a thin line. "Say it." "You say it," she replied, voice flat, brittle. Her eyes measured him. The cowboy stayed still, quiet, watching the exchange. He didn't move closer, didn't retreat. Just observed. The deputy shifted behind the sheriff, eyes down, hands in pockets. "Could have been an accident," the sheriff said, almost too casual, but the words didn't land. The room stayed tight, heavy, air pressed to their lungs. She didn't flinch. "Accident," she repeated, voice sharp, incredulous. No one answered. Only the baby, small whimpers escaping from the blanket. Cowboy adjusted him, pressed him closer, whispered, "Easy." She didn't move. Didn't speak. Only waited. Old family names hovered around the room like smoke. No one said them. They didn't need to. They hung between the walls, in the cracked wood of the floor, in the rusted lock of the sheriff's desk. The cowboy knew some of them. He didn't look at her. She didn't meet his gaze. Only the baby stirred, tiny fists pressing, searching. "Name?" the sheriff asked finally. She didn't answer. He sighed, heavy, slow. "We need a name." She shook her head. "No name," she said. "Fine," he muttered. Words clipped, final. The deputy avoided eye contact, silent witness to everything, breathing shallow. She folded her arms around the baby, pulling him in closer. He slept fitfully, tiny noises breaking the silence. The cowboy held the door open with one hand, walling them all in. No one moved. "You sure you don't want to tell?" the cowboy asked her quietly, more for her than anyone else. She shook her head. "I don't trust anyone here," she said. Not a threat. Not fear. Observation. Cold, measured. The sheriff shifted, scratched at his jaw. "Could have been anyone. Could have just been the wind," he muttered. "The wind doesn't tie people to fences," she said softly, almost to herself, eyes fixed on the floorboards. Cowboy's hand brushed against the post by the door, feeling the weight of what had been done. The deputy finally spoke, low, unsure. "We'll find whoever did this." She didn't react. Didn't speak. Only watched. Only waited. The baby stirred again, tiny mouth opening, eyes blinking. Cowboy adjusted him, murmuring, "Easy now, little one. Easy." She tightened her arms. Silent measure of him, her, the baby, the room. Shadows fell long across the walls, stretching fingers over the cracked floor, over the desk, over their silent witnesses. Time passed in breaths, small, uneven. "You can't stay here forever," the sheriff said, almost gently. She ignored him. Only measured. Cowboy leaned back, arms crossed, watching the silent negotiation between them all. "Don't let them take him," she said, voice low, final. Cowboy didn't answer. Just nodded, heavy. He knew. He understood. The baby yawned, tiny, fragile. She looked down, pressing his face against her chest. Cowboy's eyes roamed the room, walls, ceiling, the sheriff's careful posture, the deputy's uneasy stance. He didn't say a word. She didn't look at him. Only measured him, truss thin, sharp, cautious. Names were weapons. Silence was armor. She held both. Outside, the wind shifted, scratching the wooden siding, rattling the window panes. Inside, only quiet. Breaths, shifting fabric, small cries of the baby. The sheriff leaned back, resigned. The deputy's boots shuffled on the floor. Cowboy stayed still, unwavering. She finally looked at him, eyes heavy but steady. "Don't let them take him," she said again, voice barely above a whisper. No one moved. Only the weight of what had just been survived, what was yet to come, pressed down on the old office, the cracked desk, the cot, and the three silent witnesses. The cowboy left the sheriff's office and walked straight back to the fence. Dust clung to his boots, the baby cradled carefully against his chest. Rope fibers still dangled from the post, stiff and dry. Sunlight caught them, thin threads of memory hanging in the wind. The woman didn't come with him, but he could feel her gaze on his back as he approached the fence, the way she measured everything around her. He touched the post. Rough, splintered, soaked once in sweat and blood. A sudden sound flashed through his mind, not an image, just a sharp echo. Girls don't wander. Families handle their own. Fence keeps order. The words repeated, bouncing against the hollow spaces of memory. He shifted the baby, holding him higher, rocking gently. Tiny fists batted at the air. "Easy," he whispered. She hadn't said anything, hadn't moved, but he felt her in the quiet, in the distance behind him, watching. The cowboy crouched low, scanning the post. Carvings. Dates. Initials. Some fresh, some old enough to fade into the wood. Names that shouldn't have been written here. He ran his fingers over them, tracing shallow marks with care. This wasn't the first time. This post had seen things. History carved into splintered wood, blood-soaked dust, memory that refused to die. He wondered how many girls had been here before, how many lives the fence had claimed, silent witness to cruelty disguised as order. Girls don't wander, the words whispered again in his mind. He looked down at the baby. Small fists unclenched, legs tucked. Quiet now. He pressed him closer, steadying him. He could almost hear her voice, the woman's quiet, measured warning, "Don't let them take him." He nodded to himself. Not today. Not ever. The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of metal and dust. A bird took flight somewhere in the distance. Nothing else moved. Only the fence, standing, solid, eternal. He ran a hand along the rope fibers one last time before letting them fall. Dirt shifted under his boots. The baby stirred again. He murmured softly, rocking gently. Nothing could undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, they could survive this one moment. A voice in the back of his head, fragments, not clear, only sharp, families handle their own. He knew what it meant. The sheriff, the deputy, the quiet threats that had surrounded her since she could remember. He held the baby tighter. "Easy now, little one," he murmured. His eyes roamed the horizon. Dust rose from distant roads. Gravel glinted faintly under the sun. Shadows stretched long across the fence post. Carvings told stories. Initials, scratched names, dates of small deaths, warnings no one spoke aloud. The fence had memory. And it remembered. Every time he ran his hand along the splintered wood, the echoes returned. Not sights. Not voices. Only fragments. "Fence keeps order," the words came again, low, relentless. He shivered slightly, adjusting the baby. She had survived this before. Others hadn't. He would remember for her. He stood slowly. The post leaned, casting a long line across the dirt. Sunlight glinted off the baby's small fist, tiny fingers curling. He pressed him closer, whispering softly. Nothing happened. No sudden movement. Only the wind, rustling, shifting, whispering through the post like dry bones. His boots scuffed the earth, kicking up dust that swirled thin in the air. He could hear it now, the faint, distant cries of memory, not real but carried in the fence, in the splinters, in the fibers. He glanced toward town. Dusty roads stretched quiet and empty. No engines, no voices, only distant light flickering along the horizon. He held the baby against his chest, steadying himself. The woman would wait. She would watch. The post, the rope, the carvings, they all watched too. Not threatening. Not kind. Just there. Remembering. Reminding. He shifted the baby, rocking gently. Whispered again, easy, little one. Easy. Then he heard it, a soft cry, almost like the baby, but different. From memory? From distance? He couldn't tell. His heart leapt. Tiny fists pressed against his chest again. He whispered, more firmly this time. It's okay. It's okay. I've got you. The post loomed behind him, tall, unyielding, witness to every small survival, every measured silence. Dust settled. Shadows stretched. Memory hung in the fibers. The baby's cry softened, pressed close. He adjusted his hold, feeling the weight, feeling the small warmth. Nothing else mattered. Not yet. Not today. Only the fence, the memory, the baby, the quiet and precise endurance of what had been done and what would not be allowed again. He breathed in the dry, dusty air, listening, waiting, remembering for them both. The woman's borrowed room smelled faintly of damp wood and dust. The cowboy set the baby down on the bed, blanket bunched around him, arms tucked close. The child stirred, small cries escaping. She adjusted him, whispering soft nonsense to calm him. The cowboy knelt by the doorway, hands still stained faintly with rope and dried blood from earlier. He didn't ask permission to stay. She didn't ask him to leave. The air held them both in quiet tension, the night thick around them. He pulled a small bundle from his pack, milk, cloths, a few scraps of bread. She glanced at him, eyes sharp but unreadable. You always help strangers, she asked, voice low. He shrugged, fingers shaking slightly as he poured milk into a cup. Only the quiet ones. I wasn't quiet, she said. You were, he replied. Her eyes narrowed, scanning him, weighing him. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. Only the baby, soft cries quieting as the first sip of milk touched lips. The cowboy washed his hands in a basin, water running brown from old iron pipes. He wiped them on a cloth, smelling faint gun oil and dust lingering on his fingers. The baby burbled softly, tiny fists clenching, then relaxing. She watched every movement. Who's the father? She asked quietly, eyes still on him. He shook his head. She pressed her lips together, then whispered, he's tied to power. He didn't ask which one. Didn't press. He only nodded slightly, understanding enough to know promises were worthless. The wind rattled the window panes. Outside, the world slept. Inside, the room was small and narrow, walls warped and bare. The woman adjusted the baby against her chest. I can't tell who, she murmured, voice low, hesitant. Don't, the cowboy said softly. He leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, watching her. I won't go anywhere, he added, quiet but certain. She didn't respond, only focused on the baby, humming a low, soft sound he didn't recognize. The room smelled faintly of milk and metal, of dust and gun oil. Shadows stretched across walls, across floors. The baby yawned, fists curling, eyes fluttering closed. He adjusted the blanket, pressed the child closer to her chest. She didn't speak. He didn't move. Silence settled between them, only interrupted by soft breaths and the occasional shift of fabric. A sudden knock on the door startled them. The cowboy's hand went to his belt instinctively. She lifted a brow, hand tightening slightly around the baby. "Who is it?" she asked softly. No answer. Just another knock, firmer. He rose slowly, muscles coiled, careful not to wake the baby. "Stay here," he whispered. She didn't move. Just held the child, eyes fixed on him. He moved toward the door, hand on the latch. He cracked it open. Empty hallway. Shadows deep and long. Dust rose from the floorboards. "Hello," he said softly. No answer. Only silence. He glanced back at the room. She still sat, baby pressed to her chest, quiet but alert. He stepped back, closed the door slowly, locked it. She didn't look at him. Only measured him. Only waited. Only ensured the space remained theirs, temporary and fragile, safe for now. He returned to her side. "You always this careful?" he asked, tone low, almost teasing. She shook her head, faint smile, "Only just," then vanished. "Always," she murmured. The baby shifted against her chest, tiny noises escaping, then quieting. He adjusted him, whispered, "Easy." She looked at him finally, meeting his eyes. "I won't tell," she said, barely audible. "Not yet." "Good," he said. Nothing else needed. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the boards. Dust swirled against the window. The room smelled of milk and gun oil, of quiet vigilance, of small life protected in a fragile, temporary space. The cowboy settled back against the wall, watching her. She hummed softly to the baby, hand stroking small arms. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just observed. They were not safe. Not yet. But they were together. Temporary, fragile, alive. Another knock on the door. Sharp. Intentional. He tensed, hand hovering near the latch. She pressed the baby closer, murmuring, "Wait." He didn't hesitate. Survival, care, violence, they sat at the same table. Quiet, precise. Breath held. Tiny fists curled against small chest. Dust and shadow wrapped them. He would stay. No promises needed. He would stay. The knock came hard, deliberate, rattling the doorframe. The cowboy's hand went to his belt, fingers brushing the worn handle of his knife. The baby stirred in the woman's arms, tiny fists pressing against her chest. She didn't flinch. Just held him tighter, eyes sharp, calculating. "Stay behind me," he murmured. She didn't move. Not an inch. The room felt smaller, walls closing in, shadows leaning over them. Another knock. Louder this time. A scrape of boots on the wooden porch. He approached the door slowly, the baby nestled safely in the crook of his arm. He cracked it open. Two men stood there. Not lawmen. Not yet. But connections ran like rivers under the surface, old and dark, worn into the roads of this place. One smiled too easily. The other's eyes were empty and sharp. "We're just checking," the first said, voice smooth. "On what?" the cowboy asked, stepping closer to block them. "On her," came the answer, casual, dangerous. She watched from the bed, baby pressed against her chest, eyes like cold fire. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Only measured. The cowboy's jaw tightened. "I said step back," he warned, voice low, precise. The men exchanged a glance, slow, deliberate. The taller one smirked. "Relax. We're just making sure she's okay." "I said step back," the cowboy repeated, firmer. Hands flexed near his knife. The baby stirred, small whimpers escaping. He murmured softly, "Easy, little one. Easy." "Sheriff knows we're here," one of the men said casually, as if that explained everything. The cowboy didn't answer. "Sheriff says," he asked finally. "He's fine with it," the man said. "He knows. Don't worry." The words hung, hollow, dangerous. She didn't move. She pressed the baby closer. The cowboy's eyes narrowed. He stepped slightly forward, not threatening her, but making clear the line they wouldn't cross. One of the men leaned closer to the doorframe, smirk fading. "We're not here to hurt anyone," he said. Cowboy didn't respond. Only stance, only presence. Shadows stretched across the floorboards. Dust stirred faintly in the narrow beam of light from the window. Outside, the wind shifted, scraping boards, rattling the porch. The woman hummed low, a faint sound, a reminder she was watching, assessing. The taller man took a step forward. Cowboy moved with him. "Stay back," he said again. "Step off my porch," he added. "We're just checking," the man repeated, voice tight now. "For what?" Cowboy's hand brushed the knife at his hip. The men froze. The baby's small cry broke the tension, fragile and urgent. She pressed him tighter, murmuring softly, "Shoo, shoo." They exchanged a long look, weighing him, weighing the room. The smaller man tilted his head, half smile, half threat. "You think you can stop us?" he asked. "I don't think," the cowboy said. "I know." His voice was low, certain. Outside, dust rose faintly along the road. Gravel shifted as if carrying the weight of their presence away. The men paused. Smiles lingered, empty and knowing. Then, slowly, deliberately, they stepped back. "Don't think this ends here," one said, voice soft now, but cutting, deliberate. The other nodded, silent. They walked down the porch steps, boots scraping wood, dust following. The knock had faded. Silence returned. Only the baby's soft breathing, the faint hum of her voice, the weight of quiet endurance filling the room. She exhaled slowly, pressing the baby closer. "They'll come back worse," she said. Voice low, calm, not afraid. Cowboy nodded, arms tightening slightly around her, around the baby, around the fragile boundary of safety they'd carved. "I know," he murmured. He glanced toward the door, toward the empty road. Gravel shifted under nothing, dust settled. Shadows stretched long across the walls, across the floor, across them all. Time passed in small breaths. She didn't look at him. Only the baby, only the quiet vigil, only the understanding that the line had been drawn and they had held it for now. No one moved. Dust settled on the floorboards. Shadows leaned in but did not cross. Outside, the wind carried faint whispers from the road, the echo of boots and threats fading. Inside, only the room, only them, only the small life between them, safe for the moment. He adjusted the baby, murmuring softly. She hummed back faintly, gentle, steady. "They'll be back," she said again. Cowboy didn't answer. Only nodded. They both knew. Only now, they could breathe small, measured breaths, waiting, enduring, watching. The room held them, quiet, precise, fragile. The door clicked shut behind the men. Dust swirled faintly in the dim room. The baby slept fitfully in her arms, tiny fists pressing against her chest. The cowboy leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, silent, listening. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding him close, eyes fixed on some invisible point in the shadows. The room smelled faintly of milk, sweat, and gun oil. Heavy air, thick with memory. "They said it was tradition," she said softly, almost under her breath. He didn't move. "Who did?" he asked. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp and calculating. "All of them," she said, voice low, controlled. She pressed the baby closer, letting the child nuzzle into her chest. He shifted slightly, tiny whimpers breaking the silence. Cowboy murmured, "Easy. I've got him." She didn't respond, only listened, letting the words settle in the room. She spoke slowly, in pieces, fragments like shards. "The fence, it's not just wood. They use it. Mark it. Remind you." She glanced at him, eyes burning. "Girls disappear if they don't obey." He tightened his jaw. Hands flexed near his knife. She didn't notice, didn't flinch. "I wasn't supposed to survive," she said. Voice low. Trembling just slightly. "They wanted him gone." "The baby." Cowboy moved closer, kneeling. "Not on my watch," he said. She shook her head. It wasn't that simple. They expect silence. They expect fear. You think they'll stop? They won't touch you again, he said, voice quiet, firm. She stared at him, small movements, measuring him, reading him. They've done this before. Families, roads, men who own everything. They expect obedience. The baby stirred, small fist brushing against her chin. She adjusted him, whispered, "Shoo, easy." They left marks, she continued, almost to herself. Not just the ropes. Carvings. Blood. Warnings. Letters. Eyes watching from everywhere. You can't escape it. You survive by staying quiet. Cowboy listened, silent. Not judgment. Not pity. Just presence. She pressed the child tighter, eyes scanning the walls, the shadows. Every time I thought they'd take him, I stayed. Her voice faltered slightly, then strengthened. I survived for him. For this one. The cowboy exhaled softly, adjusting the baby. You did right, he said, simple. Nothing else needed. The room felt heavy with the weight of her endurance, the calculated, precise survival, the refusal to break. She looked at him finally, eyes dark and steady. They'll come again, she said. But I won't let them. He nodded. Tightened his jaw. No promises. No guarantees. Just presence. Vigilance. Care. Outside, wind rattled the boards. Dust lifted faintly from the floor. Shadows stretched across walls and floorboards, reaching, lingering, remembering. She didn't flinch. Didn't speak further. Only pressed the baby closer, small movements, careful, precise. Cowboy stayed by the doorway, watching, waiting. Every sound mattered. Every shift of air, every creak of wood, every distant noise on the road. Survival was active, deliberate, constant. You'll hold him, she asked suddenly, voice low. He nodded, shifting, pressing the baby carefully against his chest. She exhaled, steadying herself. I can't let them take him, she said again. Cowboy didn't answer. Only held the child, small cries fading as he adjusted him, murmured soft words. She watched him. Measured him. Silent acknowledgement. Presence stronger than any words. He looked at her. Eyes heavy, steady. They won't touch you again, he said finally. Words firm, precise. She didn't respond immediately. Only pressed the baby closer. Tiny fists clutched blanket, hair brushing her chin. The shadows held them both. Dust settled. The room was quiet except for soft breaths, the weight of survival, the small life they protected together. She let herself relax slightly, exhale, lean back just enough. The cowboy remained, silent, watchful. No promises, no false hope. Only presence. Only protection. Only the quiet, measured certainty that this night, this moment, they had survived together. The fence, the shadows, the roads, the men, they hadn't won. Not yet. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe, tiny and careful, the baby warm against her chest, the world narrowing to this room, the small, fragile life, and the man who would not leave. Dawn barely crept over the horizon when the cowboy left the room. Dust clung to his boots, baby still cradled against his chest. The woman watched from the bed, blanket pulled tight, eyes dark and alert. He didn't speak. He didn't ask permission. He moved through the borrowed room like a shadow, careful and deliberate. Every sound, the creak of floorboards, the faint rustle of cloth echoed in the quiet morning. Outside, the fence waited. Rope fibers frayed, splintered wood soaked in memory. He knelt, examining each carving, each date, each initial. Names etched like scars. Small reminders of cruelty repeated over years. He traced them with calloused fingers, pressing lightly, feeling the weight of every survival and every loss. The baby kicked softly against his chest, tiny fist brushing his chin. Easy, he whispered. Breath steady, heart steady, focus sharp. He gathered letters and scraps from the ground, evidence left hidden. Folded papers, small marks on the wood, a careful record of what had been done and what must be remembered. Names of men, dates of deeds, promises unkept. He stacked them in his jacket pocket, careful not to crease, careful not to lose a single word. Memory had its own law here, he thought. He had to respect it. A spark caught in his mind. Not metaphor. Not memory. A small fire at the base of the fence, dry grass catching instantly. He didn't move quickly enough to stop it. The fire licked upward, hungry, fast. Smoke rose in thin columns, curling over the splintered wood. He didn't panic. He didn't call. He watched, calculating. The fire had begun. He stepped back, baby pressed close. "Easy, little one," he murmured, voice low, certain. People began to gather, distant figures along the horizon, drawn by smoke and the smell of charred grass. Whispers traveled fast, faster than he expected. The sheriff appeared, badge glinting in the early light. "What the hell?" he called, voice carrying over the crackle of fire. Cowboy didn't flinch. Only held the baby closer. The woman stepped outside, blanket still wrapped tight, eyes dark with quiet fire. "You protecting law or blood?" the cowboy demanded, voice loud, deliberate. Sheriff paused, fingers tightening on the badge. "Same thing here," he said, slow, careful. "Not anymore," the cowboy shot back. His words cut, sharp, final. Smoke curled around them. Shadows stretched across the ground, dark and heavy. The baby stirred, tiny fists pressing against the cowboy's chest. He murmured, easy, steadying him. People watched. Some frozen, some whispering, some nodding faintly. The fire burned, small but defiant, threatening nothing yet. Evidence in his pocket, names on the fence, weight of survival pressing down, he didn't move. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Dust swirled faintly. The air smelled of smoke, dry earth, and fear. Quiet authority met raw defiance. He stepped closer to the fence, careful, deliberate. Smoke curling at his boots, letters pressed into his pocket, carved initials beneath charred splinters. He turned toward the sheriff, voice steady, certain. "This ends with choice," he said. "Not fear." The crowd murmured, hushed, unsure, waiting. The sheriff looked around, eyes shifting, lips tight. He touched the badge. Slowly. Hesitant. Finally, letting it slip from his chest, falling to the ground with a dull thud. The fire crackled, small flames licking the wood. Shadows moved across faces in the crowd, reflecting uncertainty and awe. He held the baby against his chest, steady, warm. The woman stood beside him, eyes unflinching. The land smelled of smoke, dust, and defiance. Choice, finally, carved a small line through fear. No words needed beyond the one spoken. She pressed the baby closer, murmuring soft nonsense, calming him as the fire burned, small but deliberate. Cowboy adjusted him, whispered, "Easy, little one. Easy." Around them, the town watched, silent, processing, unprepared. Symbols cracked, authority shaken, memory exposed. Shadows leaned over the fence post, smoke rising, evidence hidden, names remembered, choice finally made. The sheriff remained on the edge, silent, badge forgotten in the dirt. Dust settled around them, smoke curling thin into the dawn. The baby stirred, tiny noises escaping. She exhaled softly. Cowboy nodded. No words. Only the fire, the fence, the letters, the baby, the woman, and the quiet certainty that for once, the power of fear had been met with something else, deliberate, precise, unstoppable. The smoke hung low, curling over the charred fence, drifting into the sky. Dust settled over the gathered crowd. The fire had burned itself out mostly, leaving blackened earth and scorched wood, but its presence lingered, heavy and deliberate. She stepped forward from the shadows, baby cradled against her chest, blanket bunched tight. Her boots scuffed gravel as she moved. Eyes steady. Voice quiet, but carrying. "You tied me," she said, tone calm, clear. Faces froze. Murmurs stopped. The cowboy stood behind her, arms crossed, watchful. The baby stirred, tiny fists pressing into her chest. She adjusted him, whispering softly. You watched, she continued. You knew. Names, long unspoken, hung in the air. Some left. Some stayed frozen, unable to meet her eyes. The weight of history pressed down, silent, undeniable. A man near the edge swallowed hard. Another turned away, hands pressed to his mouth. She didn't flinch. Didn't hesitate. Each word precise, measured. Enough, she said. Enough of silence. Enough of lies. Enough of power used against those who survive. She shifted the baby slightly, pressing him closer. The crowd was still, waiting, absorbing. The sheriff's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to the blackened fence. The badge lay forgotten in the dust. You think you can control everything? She asked, voice rising just slightly. Think again. Names. Dates. Evidence. Memory. You can't erase what's survived. The baby stirred, tiny cries escaping. She hushed him gently, murmuring nonsense, steady and soothing. The cowboy watched from behind, silent, alert. She didn't need him to speak. The words carried on their own. Some in the crowd whispered to each other. Fear. Recognition. Guilt. Others stayed still, unable to look away. Her presence was a quiet storm, precise, controlled. She spoke again, voice low, cutting through the haze of smoke and dust. You thought silence would protect you. It never has. It never will. She shifted slightly, letting the baby peek over her shoulder. Small eyes blinked, curious, fragile. She pressed him back against her chest, steady, warm. Names, she said, clear and deliberate. Finally spoken. She let them hang. Faces tightened, some flushed. The weight of long-hidden truths pressed over the town like an unrelenting tide. She didn't falter. Didn't blink. The cowboy stepped slightly forward, baby cradled in one arm, ready if needed. She didn't ask him to. She didn't need him to. Presence was enough. Vigilance was enough. One man whispered, half to himself, half to the shadows, we never. She cut him off with a glance. You did, she said. And now, it ends. The baby stirred again, tiny fists flexing. She murmured softly, shoo, easy, little one. Her voice, calm, precise, steady, anchored him in the chaos of memory, threat, and defiance. Some people left. Some stayed, frozen, witnessing the collapse of old authority. The sheriff stepped forward slightly, hands empty, eyes cautious. She didn't flinch. Didn't speak to him directly. Only presence. Only strength. The fire had burned, the fence remained, scarred but standing. So did she. Quiet, deliberate, strong. The crowd learned to measure her in that moment. She handed the baby briefly to the cowboy, letting him press close against his chest. Tiny fists flexed. She murmured softly, almost a smile breaking through the shadows. Then she took him back. Steady. Certain. Eyes scanning the crowd, ensuring clarity. Presence over words, defiance over fear, survival over silence. The sun rose higher, casting light over the blackened earth and the small crowd still watching. Dust swirled faintly in the air. Shadows leaned away. She held the baby, still, unflinching. Cowboy stayed nearby, silent, alert. No promises, no guarantees, only endurance and the quiet reclamation of what had been stolen. The town listened. Had to. And for the first time in a long time, the weight of their history didn't control her. The sun rose fully over the quiet land. Dust settled over the blackened fence. Only one post remained standing, scarred, splintered, but upright. The cowboy adjusted the baby in his arms, small fists flexing, tiny whimpers quieting against his chest. The woman stood a few feet away, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, eyes dark and steady. No one moved. No words were needed. The moment held them all in balance. "You staying?" she asked, voice low, calm. He shook his head, adjusting the baby again. "No," he said simply. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, measuring him. "Good," she replied. A faint breeze stirred, carrying the smell of charred wood and dust. He glanced toward the lone post, scarred but resolute, a silent witness to everything that had come before and all that would come after. "You?" he asked finally. She straightened, tiny fists pressing the baby closer. "I already stayed," she said. Voice firm, certain. They both looked at the post, standing alone, the rest of the fence gone, memories preserved in wood and scar. Dust swirled faintly in the morning light, shadows stretching long across the ground. The land was quiet, not healed, but changed. He knelt slightly, holding the baby steady. Tiny fingers flexed, brushing against his shoulder. He murmured softly, "Easy now, little one. Easy." She watched, eyes dark and steady, measuring every movement. He didn't speak further. Only presence. Only care. Only the quiet knowledge that the line had been drawn, crossed, and held. The baby shifted against his chest, eyes blinking open, curious and small. The woman moved closer to the post, hand brushing lightly over the rough wood. Names, dates, initials, every scar a story. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. Only touched, pressed, remembered. Cowboy watched her, silent, steady, arms holding the small life between them. Presence, quiet, deliberate, unspoken promise in every movement. The morning wind carried faint dust, the smell of dry earth, char, and survival. "You've done enough," he said finally. Voice low, precise. She looked at him, dark eyes measuring. "We both have," she replied. The baby yawned, tiny mouth opening against the blanket. She pressed him closer, murmuring soft nonsense, calm and steady. Cowboy shifted slightly, holding him closer for just a moment longer, then began to stand. The wind brushed against the post, carrying whispers from history, from memory, from what had survived. No one spoke for long moments. Only the faint rustle of fabric, the tiny breathing of the baby, the soft exhale of the woman. The post remained, silent witness. Dust settled over the ground. Shadows leaned across the scarred earth. Cowboy adjusted the baby one last time, pressing him carefully to the chest. The world was quiet, but no longer oppressive. Memory had weight, but it no longer had power over them. She stepped closer, tiny fists pressing the blanket. "Remember this," she said softly, almost to herself. "What survives is ours. What we hold is ours." He nodded slightly. Only that. No words to complicate, no promises to break. Only the certainty of presence, of care, of endurance. The baby stirred slightly, small noises escaping, but quiet and secure. She pressed him closer, steady, firm. Cowboy adjusted the strap of his pack, boots scuffing the dirt. "Take care," he said. She nodded. "Always," she replied. He glanced at the post once more, scarred, upright, witness to everything, symbol of endurance, of choice. Then he turned, walking down the dusty road, baby held steady, small life warm against his chest. She stood alone, watching. Tiny fists against her chest. Blanket tight. Shadow long across her shoulders. The land was quiet now, scarred, waited, changed. The post remained, standing alone. Not a marker of fear. Not a threat. A witness to endurance, to memory, to what survives when voices refuse to break. She pressed the baby closer one last time. Tiny breaths. Tiny life. Dust swirled faintly. The land breathed. They were still here. Scarred, steady, and unbroken.